So at the beginning of the anime, we are shown two teenage friends, Senkuu and Taiju. Senkuu is a brilliant scientist, and Taiju is an ordinary teenage athlete who is in love with his girlfriend Yuzuriha. He wants to confess his love to her, but first decides to tell his friend Senkuu about it. Afterwards, he meets Yuzuriha and almost tells her everything. However, an incomprehensible explosion occurs that turns all people into stone. People remain conscious, but they are completely covered in stone. Years pass, then centuries, and even millennia. Suddenly, the stone covering Taiju cracks, and he completely gets rid of the stone prison. He begins to explore the surroundings and finds his petrified friend Yuzuriha. And next to her, he finds an inscription saying that the fool should go downstream of the river. He walked along the river where he met his friend Senkuu, who, as it turned out, had already been unfrozen for 6 months. Senkuu said that today is October 5th, 5738, and that they were in stone for as long as 3,700 years. After which, Senkuu talks about his plan to unfreeze all people and return to the modern world. Taiju does all the heavy lifting and Senkuu does all the development and testing. It turns out that Senkuu partially unraveled the secret of their stone defrosting, which is associated with the contact of nitric acid on the stone, which is obtained by mixing the droppings of bats and water. True, further tests did not lead him anywhere. However, if he had alcohol, which he would combine with nitric acid to make Natal, this reagent has industrial strength, and the defrost capability would be much higher. Taiju suggests making alcohol from grapes, which he eventually does, and then they manage to defrost the fossilized bird. Next, Senkuu gives Taiju the right to be the first to choose who they will defrost. He, of course, chose to unfreeze Yuzuriha. They go to her statue, where Senkuu almost poured defrosting liquid on her. However, since she had no clothes on, Taiju decided to dress her first, and then defrost her. But immediately afterwards, they are attacked by a pride of lions. In order to escape, they decide to unfreeze the strongest of the teenagers, Shishu Tsukasa, who has unrealistic physical strength that he can even kill a lion with one blow. Tsukasa takes over the hunting and fishing duties. Next, Senkuu talks about the need to extract calcium carbonate. It can be used in construction, sanitation, and also in fertilizing plants. They extract it from the hands on the beach. That evening, Tsukasa tells a story from which Senkuu learns that Tsukasa is against defrosting adults, because with their greed and greed, they can destroy this new untouched stone world. Therefore, he is in favor of reviving only sincere youth, and kill everyone else. Next, he tears off the stone head of an adult man, thereby killing him. Senkuu, of course, does not agree with him, since his goal is to unfreeze absolutely all people. Then Taiju appears there with a full bottle of liquid to defrost Yuzuriha. However, Senkuu told him that there was too little liquid, so he asked Taiju to bring more. But Tsukasa decided to intervene. He stopped Taiju and said that it would be better for him to go get this liquid himself, because he is faster than Taiju. And at that moment, Senkuu realized that Tsukasa was trying to understand the composition of the defrosting reagent in order to further defrost only selected people. Based on this, as soon as Tsukasa left, Senkuu told Taiju the whole truth about Tsukasa. Next, they proceeded to unfreeze Yuzuriha, and then Senkuu offered two options to survive. The first is to try to defeat Tsukasa in battle, or the second is for Taiju and Yuzuriha to run away and settle somewhere far away. However, Tsukasa immediately appeared next. Taiju came to the guy's defense, and Senkuu at that time shot straight at Tsukasa. But he catches the arrow and also kicks Taiju away. Afterwards, Tsukasa decides to leave Senkuu and the company, and goes to survive solo, since he believes that no one can stop him from carrying out his plan. Senkuu understands that to win, they need to further develop their technologies. In this regard, they go to the hot springs to collect sulfur and then create gunpowder and kill Tsukasa before it's too late. However, Tsukasa figured out Senku's plan. He realized what they were planning, and he went to stop them. Next, while Taiju and Yuzuriha were recovering in the hot springs, Senkuu was getting ingredients to make gunpowder. He took sulfur, added coal, and mixed it all with potassium nitrate, also known as silica. And at the end, he received black powder, which will be their trump card in negotiations with Tsukasa. Then an accidental explosion occurs due to a spark from a stone when compacting gunpowder. However, Senkuu is pleased as the mixture turned out to be very powerful. Next, we are shown Tsukasa, who realized that if Senkuu manages to create gunpowder, he will have to be killed. Well, in the meantime, Yuzuriha then notices a smoke signal. They decide to make a few more explosions to make sure that this signal is not a dummy. However, Tsukasa arrives and takes Yuzuriha prisoner. He threatens to kill her unless Senkuu hands over the recipe for the depetrification liquid. And he even cuts off Yuzuriha's hair. In this connection, Senkuu reveals to him the recipe for life-giving water. However, Tsukasa still decides to kill Senkuu, since he will still be dangerous in the future. Tsukasa hits Senkuu in the neck, and he falls lifeless. An angry Taiju grabs a rock and throws it up. At the same time, Yuzuriha grabs a gunpowder bomb and throws it at Tsukasa. A falling rock creates a spark, and everything around Tsukasa explodes. At this time, Taiju is grabbed by Senkuu, and together with Yuzuriha, they run away. Next, we are shown Senku's memories of how he unfroze, and also a meeting with the monkeys, to whom he proved that bald monkeys are the smartest people. As a result, he sewed clothes for himself, created tools, and built a house. Next, Senkuu found a statue of Taiju, whom he unfrozen by dragging his statue into a cave with nitric acid. Meanwhile, in the real world, the guys are trying to somehow revive Senkuu, and they find a small petrified stone on his neck. It turns out that when the fossil is removed, the wounds partially heal. Based on this, Senkuu comes to his senses and praises the guys for the fact that they were able to save him with just one stiff and petrified neck. Senkuu realizes that Tsukasa thinks he is dead and wants to take advantage of this. He invited Taiju and Yuzuriha to join Tsukasa, to fit him from the inside. And during this time, he will find the people who gave the smoke signals. And at this time, Tsukasa finds Kohaku, who saw how Tsukasa took the girl hostage, and that he then killed the young man, because of which she begins to furiously attack him. However, Tsukasa knocks her back with a punch and chops down a tree on her. Then, after Tsukasa leaves, Senkuu comes there and saves Kohaku by lifting a tree with a lever. Based on this whole situation, Kohaku offers to help in the fight against Tsukasa. She also agrees to introduce him to other people. On the way, she decides to get hot water for her sick sister Ruri. Senkuu assembles the cart and they set off at speed. However, they crash right in front of the village where Kohaku lives. At the entrance to the village, they are met by guards Kinro and Jinro, who refuse to let a stranger through. However, Senkuu blows bubbles, and the guards, in surprise, decide to use the fucked up no jutsu technique. Then Chrome, a brilliantly smart sorcerer, appears there, who begins to perform tricks with fire, changing its color. However, Senkuu solved all these tricks in a couple of seconds, in connection with which Chrome challenges Senkuu to a battle of numbers, where Senkuu wins on easy. And as a result, Chromium gives access to all its reserves of minerals and plants. Now their main goal is to save Kohaku's sister, Ruri. And Senku's hidden goal is to defeat Tsukasa with the help of this village. But first we need to create an antibiotic. Senkuu told everyone the plan to get penicillin, and subsequently antibiotics. First, you need to collect iron. For this they have a magnet that Chrome found. They are also joined by a little girl, Suika. Next, they try to melt the iron, but they need labor. They send Suika to spy on the residents to understand their desires. And it turns out that the dream of most residents is new delicious food. The outcome of which Senkuu cooks delicious ramen and exchanges a bowl of ramen for a few hours of work in the forge. Then they unexpectedly meet the mentalist Asagiri Gen, who is unfrozen. He turns out to be Tsukasa's henchman, who was sent to find out if Senkuu is alive. However, Gen, seeing what's going on here, decided to go over to Senku's side, since he was already able to extract the metal. Senkuu is also going to create a generator. To do this, with the help of metal, copper, a guard spear, and a large bolt of lightning, he creates a strong magnet, and after creates a double generator with manual drive, and even creates a working Edison light bulb to generate electricity. Also, while all this was happening, Gina was trying to kill Magma. However, it turned out that Magma wanted to attack Senkuu, but he mixed everything up and attacked the wrong one. Kohaku also talks about a great battle, the winner of which will become Ruri's fiancé and the leader of the village. Based on this, they begin to train the guards Kinro and Jinro so that they can defeat the previous winner Magma. And already at night, Gen escapes to Tsukasa's kingdom, where he gives false information that Senkuu is dead. Senkuu also told everyone about the night conversation with Asagiri Gen, where he finally decided that if he were to live in the world, then in the world of science, has on their side, and he will do all this for the sake of Coca-Cola. Next, Kohaku continues to train Kinro and Jinro, and Senkuu decides to get the glass. Since clay pots are not suitable for experiments with medicines, it also turns out that Suika has vision problems, and because of this, she wears a mask. Senkuu decides to create lenses for her and insert them into the mask. Later, it becomes known that Kinro also has a vision problem, and Senkuu and Chrome begin to create the necessary glass devices, but they do not have enough skills for this. In this regard, Chrome decides to bring here the grandfather of the artisan Koseki, who can help them. grandfather makes all the necessary glassware, and then they build a laboratory for themselves. And the first thing they do is create a silver spear for Jinro, which they will use as an indicator when looking for sulfuric acid. Next, they find an emerald lake, the water of which melts absolutely everything. With a silver spear, they discover deadly vapor zones. And they also create gas masks for themselves. Next, Senkuu and Chrome argue which of them will go to collect sulfuric acid. In the end, they both go there. Jinro also goes after them, and they successfully collect sulfuric acid. Then they return back to base, and they start chemistry. They produce hydrochloric acid. Then they create chlorosulfonic acid. Next, sodium hydroxide is created. Then extract ammonia, and all that remains for them to get is alcohol, which they can get if they win the great battle. That's why even Senkuu decides to participate in these fights. In the first fight, Kinro and Magama fight. Also at this time, Kohaku is tricked into going to the river to save Suika. She's competing in the third fight, but if she doesn't make it back before the fight starts, she'll be eliminated. Meanwhile, Kinro fights Magma on an equal footing. However, due to his eyesight, he receives quite good Liuli. Suika appears and gives him her mask, because of which he can finally see all of Magma's attacks, and he pounces on him. However, Magma still manages to win by deception, by hitting Kinro in the head while he was talking to the judge, and the victory is awarded to Magma. The next fight will be Chrome versus Mantle, where Mantle gives up after a couple of minutes so that a new battle can quickly begin, and Kohaku is eliminated from the tournament. Kohaku had to fight against Senkuu, and in the end, Senkuu moves on. Next, the battle between Jinro and Argo begins, where Jinro wins with great difficulty. The next fight is already a semi-final between Chrome and Magma, where Magma beats him up, but Chrome doesn't intend to give up. Chrome grabs Suika's broken mask and tries to use it to set Magma's clothes on fire. And he manages to do it, and then with a blow to Magma's balls, he wins this fight. Now Chrome is in the finale, Jinro and Senkuu. In this connection, the battle between Jinro and Senkuu begins, where Jinro goes crazy and forgets about their plan, because he decided to win this championship and become the leader of the village. He starts attacking Senkuu non-stop. However, our genius defeats him with a smart blow to Jinro's balls. Senkuu advances to the finals along with Chrome. However, after defeating Magma, Chrome switches off and drops out. The victory in the finals is credited to Senkuu, and he is recognized as the winner of the great battle and the leader of the village. At the beginning, he agrees to marry Ruri, but then immediately divorces her. Then our scientists begin to create a medicine, where they need to take 25 steps to create this miracle. As a result, a whole 6 months have passed since Senkuu began appearing in the villages, and he finally created an antibiotic. He also made a Coke for Jen. Next, they give the medicine to Ruri, and she drinks it. However, she becomes even worse than before. But Senkuu realized that she felt bad, because at the moment, the medicine was defeating the bacteria. Senkuu gives her more medicine, and after a few days, Ruri recovers. Father Ruri and Kohaku proclaim Senkuu the leader of the village, and also reveal that the name of this village was Ishigami, and this is the name of Senkuu's adoptive father for a moment. Next, Ruri tells a story in which we are shown how Senkuu helped his father Ishigami Byakuya become an astronaut, who at the time the petrifying light appeared, was on the ISS, and he was not petrified. Byakuya and his team decide to return to Earth and try to save everyone. Their capsule lands near the island. They begin to explore it with the hope of finding survivors, not petrified people. However, they only find stone statues, and so 3 years pass. During this time, they all got married and gave birth to children. Whereas the founders of the village where Senkuu is now located was Byakuya. It turns out that all the villagers are not blood relatives of Senkuu, and the stories that are passed down from generation to generation, all this was passed down by Senkuu's father, so that it would be useful in the future. Ruri also showed Senkuu the cemetery where the founders of the village are buried, and Gen also told everyone that Tsukasa and his people moved out to attack this village, and they sent him here as a spy. Next, Kinro notices Tsukasa's men, led by Hyuga. Kinro manages to turn off several warriors, but Hyuga defeats him and throws him off the bridge. Senkuu decides to make a fake with a firearm, where he makes a firecracker out of the last gunpowder, and asks Magma to throw a stone at the enemy. And at the same time, he himself explodes the firecracker, and they manage to imitate a shot. Also, to enhance the effect, Gen shouted that there was a gun in the village. Based on this, the opponents decided to retreat, and after 3 days, Hyuga decides to send his people to meet in order to understand what weapons the village has. And during this time, Senkuu made everyone katanas, with which they destroy the Hyuga warriors. Next, Hyuga himself entered the battle, and with the help of his spear, knocked out several katanas. However, it turned out that Gen damaged Hyuga's spear in advance. It breaks during the fight, and Hyuga loses. However, it is revealed that the fight on the bridge was a diversion, so Homura could burn the bridges and houses, where having done the job, they retreated with Hyuga and the fighters. However, that was not all, because their plan was to gather all the inhabitants in one place with the help of a fire, and attack again. Suika manages to distract Hyuga and the fighters and lure them all to a lake with sulfuric acid, where some of the fighters are poisoned by gases and the rest are blocked on a tree. Thus, the village of Ishigami was able to fight back. Senkuu also realized that Tsukasa already knows that they don't have gunpowder. Therefore, he decides to counterattack and attack Tsukasa's kingdom in the spring itself. But first, Senkuu decides to create a mobile phone, so that he can win with the help of communications. Meanwhile, Hyuga got to Tsukasa and told him that Senkuu was alive, and the fact that Gen is a traitor. From all this, Senkuu realized that Taiju and Yuzuriha would be used as prisoners, and that they only had a couple of months before Tsukasa's attack. Senkuu, with all the strength of the village, begins to stubbornly move towards his goal of creating a mobile phone. The first thing they will need is cotton candy, or rather, this is the way to produce it. Senkuu also notices that Homura is following them. He is trying to bribe her with cotton candy. Next, they create a whole mechanism for the production of cotton candy. Then they create threads of gold, and then a long rope of gold. Meanwhile, Chrome and Koseki created a water wheel, to which they connected a generator, and thereby created a hydroelectric power station. Now, they have a lot of free electricity to store, which they created a battery. They also created a machine for blowing up the furnace, and they also began preparing for winter and collecting supplies. Next, they go deep into the caves for rare minerals, and they begin to create a vacuum radio tube, which will be the heart of the phone. After celebrating the new year, they find tungsten, which is exactly what is needed for the vacuum tube. However, there is too little of it, so Senkuu, Chrome, and Magma go to the caves to collect tungsten. In the cave, Senkuu and Magma accidentally fall into a shale hole, from which they escape with the help of water and the power of magma. Then they find skarn deposits, which contain a whole bunch of minerals. There they get tungsten, and also a whole bunch of other minerals. And upon returning to the village, Senkuu had a surprise, in the form of a space observatory, so it was his birthday. According to Senku's plan, the first thing they did was create the heart of the mobile phone, the vacuum tube. Next is plastic for the skeleton, a microphone for the vocal cords, and gold wire as veins. Senkuu also used chemistry to create tungsten paste, and Chrome and Koseki's grandfather went to create a device for spot heating. As a result, Senkuu managed to make tungsten paste, and Chrome and company managed to create a real Frankenstein mechanism. And as a result, they created a tungsten filament. However, to create a vacuum radio tube, a Hickman vacuum apparatus is needed. Grandfather, a craftsman, went to create it, and Senkuu and Chrome went to create plastic. They imprisoned Jean for creating 800 batteries. And then they created a microphone. As a result, the vacuum radio tube is ready, the microphone is ready, the wires are ready, the plastic is ready, and they created the most powerful weapon of all time, the telephone. However, to use this phone, you need another exactly the same device. That's what they did. They also create a speaker to hear sounds from the tube. Senkuu also realized that his father left a time capsule for him in his tombstone, in which they found a record with the voices of his father and his team. Senkuu and the team created a record player, and on the recording, they heard Byakuya's voice and his address to Senkuu, and also a song by the singer Lilian was recorded there. Based on this, Senkuu promises to show the full power of science in the future. Also, at the end, we are shown Taiju and Yuzuriha, who are looking forward to meeting Senkuu. And Tsukasa and Hyuga continue to resurrect warriors for their future victory over the Kingdom of Science. This concludes the first season of the anime. And we are waiting for the release of the second season, where the battle for the future of the planet should take place. Thanks everyone for watching. See you in the next video.